Hello, everyone. This is Bill Kashard from Service Rocket. Welcome to our webinar, Migrating from Hipchat to Mattermost for Modern DevOps Collaboration. We are just getting warmed up. People are joining the webinar now, and in 1 minute, we will start the webinar officially. So just hang tight, and we will get started shortly. And in the meantime, as you have questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to type those into the Q&A box or the chat box for that matter, and we will take questions throughout the webinar. So we're not going to wait to the end for questions. So as you have questions throughout the webinar, whenever you want, type those in, and I will do my best to get those asked and answered in the context of the moment when it's relevant to the webinar. So please do that. And we're going to start in about 30 seconds. And for those of you who are just joining, welcome to our webinar, Migrating from Hipchat to Mattermost. And we are going to start in about 15 or so seconds. We're letting people sign in and join, and we will get started shortly. So hang tight, and we'll get started in just a few seconds. Okay, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Bill Kashard, and I am with Service Rocket. I want to thank you all for joining us for our webinar today. We have a really fun topic and a really fun guest as well. And the webinar is called Migrating from Hipchat to Mattermost for Modern Day DevOps Collaboration. And we have a guest speaker. Let's go next. Jason Blay, he's a product manager for Mattermost. Jason, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Bill?
I'm great, and we're really glad to have you. And Jason is on to talk to us about Mattermost. Many of our customers are using Hipchat server, and we want to talk to those people specifically who are looking for a solution. That's why you're probably joining, looking for a solution for having a secure messaging product, and you're not necessarily interested in going to the cloud. So that's what we're here to talk about today. But before we do, I'd like to get warmed up a little bit and find out where in the world everyone is. So it would be fun if everyone could type into the chat box what city they're in. And I am in Palo Alto, California at our offices at Service Rocket. And Jason, where in the world are you?
I'm in Toronto, Ontario. So
very good.
Hour away from New York City.
That's very good. And I see Kirtan is in New York City. Very good. Brian's in Washington, D.C. So we have people on the East Coast. Carmel, Indiana. Ben in New York City. San Francisco, Steve. All right. So we are all over the world. Dallas, Texas. All right. Very good. Go Cowboys. Or Mavericks, whatever. Cool. So now we know. So I also wanted everyone to do that because what we would like to do is take questions throughout the webinar. So as you have questions for Jason, feel free to type those into the chat box. I will be monitoring that, and I will get those questions to Jason throughout the webinar. We think that makes it a little more conversational. It brings you into the conversation and into the topic. So that way you don't have to wait to the very end to ask questions, so that we don't run out of time and have to skip your questions. So please feel free to type those in throughout the webinar, and I will be monitoring those, and we'll get those to Jason. And for those of you who don't know us, we are a Platinum Solution Partner, and Service Rocket, we've been around since 2001. We were the first Atlassian partner, and we have offices all over the world. And if you want to know more about us, Atlassian.servicerocket.com. And for those of you that don't know, we do have a podcast called Nice Work, an Atlassian ecosystem podcast. We're up to episode 54 now, and we talk to people throughout the Atlassian ecosystem about how they're using the tools to improve their lives and do great work and do innovative things. So feel free to check that out too. You can Google Nice Work Podcast and it'll come right up. But before we go, I want to just get right to Jason, our guest speaker. So Jason, welcome to the show. I want to hand over the controls to you. so that you can help us learn more about Mattermost. So here I'm going to stop and you
Great.
should be able to
Going to
take
share my
control.
screen and present. Good. Thank you, Bill, for the introduction.
Yeah.
Really glad to be here and welcome everyone to the webinar. So as Bill mentioned, I'll be speaking about the open source messaging platform for the modern enterprise, and in particular focus on migrating from Hipchat to Mattermost, more specifically. And just to get started, before talking about Mattermost specifically, I want to touch on a universal problem for DevOps that I personally seen while being in this space for a few years now. And while we're seeing workflows being shifted from email to messaging platforms, and while that has enabled real-time collaboration, more effective workflows, increased productivity, it has also resulted in some challenges. And one common challenge or concern that I've heard when talking to various DevOps teams is around data control and data privacy. And in particular, for many of these systems that you see on the screen, there isn't a good ability to audit your system. There might be inadequate security measurements, security measures in place, and your data might be monitored by third parties. And in essence, you don't have control of your data. You cannot control where it's stored, how it's transmitted, and that can be concerning to a lot of DevOps teams that operate in high trust environments with confidential information. In addition to data privacy, another challenge that I've seen is around extending the capabilities of the platform beyond just messaging to extending it to cover and meet various workflows that DevOps teams have. As an example, you might have Jenkins pipelines, or you might be using Jenkins for your pipelines. You might be using GitLab or GitHub for your Git workflows, Jira for issue tracking, and so forth. And having very deep integrations to these systems is paramount to be able to work effectively in the messaging platform. And that's another challenge that I've heard from DevOps teams. And then I'd say a third one is around scale. So as the team grows, they want the system and the platform to scale with them. And some of the platforms might have scaling issues. There might be outages from multi-tenant dependencies. And in general, since you're not controlling the system, there's just a lot more unknowns, unknown disaster recoveries, as an example. And data control or data privacy, extendability, and scale are things that Mattermost has really been focused on solving when it comes to DevOps collaboration and messaging. So then, speaking of Mattermost, the top-rated Hipchat alternative, today there are more than 10,000 unique downloads per month of the product, and Mattermost is an open source software. And as a result, we've been engaging and working alongside our developers to build the platform. And in fact, we have more than 1,000 contributors worldwide, contributing anywhere from actual code changes to fix bugs or ship new features, to translations, to documentation improvements. And the open source community has really enabled very rapid pace of development, which is which has been really exciting to see throughout working with the project. There's also syntax highlighting for more than 55 languages and file formats. And the reason I mention this is that this is basically an example of making it easier for DevOps teams to collaborate in the platform, where if they share code snippets or code blocks, these are automatically highlighted in a language-specific way that they are familiar with and accustomed to out of the box. There are more than 600 enterprises using the enterprise version of Mattermost. The Mattermost interface has been translated to 16 languages, which is another example actually of our open source community. So each of these languages were originally contributed by the community. And there's even more languages in progress and being actively worked on. And then lastly, when deploying Mattermost, you have a choice for deploying for hybrid or on-premise deployments. And in general, there's a lot of flexibility for how you can deploy Mattermost. You can deploy it on your Linux system like Ubuntu or Red Hat. You can deploy it on a containerized system such as Kubernetes or Cloud Foundry, or you can deploy on a private cloud, including AWS or Azure. So in addition to having control of your own data, you also have control on which system or which platform you can deploy Mattermost on. And then on the next slide, there's a few, topics or items that are specifically ideal for Atlassian server and data center customers. First thing is having a seamless migration from Hipchat to Mattermost. And I'll be giving a demonstration of what that looks like in a few moments. There are also deep integrations with various Atlassian tools, including Jira and Confluence, which you'll see also later in a live demonstration. And then with other tools, including Bitbucket, Opsgenie, and others. And that really helps bring your workflows with your Atlassian tools into the Mattermost platform. As mentioned previously, you have various options for deploying on-premise. You can deploy on private or hybrid clouds with access to source code, given Mattermost is open source, with no third-party monitoring, and with full control of your data. And then finally, for data center customers, Mattermost is built on a single tenant architecture, which offers high availability, offers horizontal scaling to meet basically your scalable needs. And as an example, we've ran load tests against the Mattermost platform with 200,000 users, with 60,000 of them concurrently active, ran them successfully. We have an article of that on our blog. We also have customers like Uber who have deployed Mattermost with tens of thousands of users meeting their scaling needs. And then finally on the next slide is a snapshot of some of the customers that are using the Enterprise Edition version. And these customers range across different industries, from high-tech manufacturing to consumer online services, finance, healthcare, airspace. And what's common for these customers is that, yes, they are looking for a modern DevOps collaboration platform. But in addition to that, they are looking for data privacy, having full control of your data, having the ability to deeply integrate with existing systems and existing workflows and bringing them on to a collaboration platform. And then third, having the ability to scale as part of or with the organization. So before going to the next section, I'll pause and see if there's any questions so far.
Jason, there are no questions right now, but I just want to remind the audience that feel free to type in your questions into the chat or the Q&A box when you have them, and I'll get those to Jason. So go ahead, Jason.
Awesome. So the next topic is about migrating your Hipchat data to Mattermost. And it happens in 3 simple steps. Step 1 is to set up your Mattermost instance. And as mentioned previously, there's various options for you, whether it's on-premise or on a private cloud. You go to our download page, you download the Linux binary, and off you go. And we have various documentation and guides for how to install and deploy Mattermost to your environment. Step 2 is then to carry out the migration from Hipchat to Mattermost. And there are several options available. There are some open source migration tools that were built by our community. One example is Migratemost. And then there's also a Hipchat to Mattermost migration tool that was built by an Atlassian Platinum partner, Hertzum, which exports data from Hipchat and automatically sets up channels, users, and messages in Mattermost. And I will actually show a demonstration of this tool in a couple of minutes. And then step 3 is once you've done the migration, you onboard your users. So invite your team to start using Mattermost. You could do that by posting an alert in Hipchat, or you can send an announcement email. There's also some documentation of sample email templates that you can use. So three simple steps to migrate your data. 1, set up your Mattermost instance. 2, migrate your data to Mattermost. And then 3, onboard and invite your users.
Jason, a question has come in, and it's sort of speaking to the user's comment. This is from Ben. On the customer list that you showed earlier, what is the usage like? Is it by team or is it enterprise? And the other comment is, assuming most of these companies use Teams, Ben, I assume that means Microsoft Teams. How does that work competitively? In other words, what's the usage like? Is it just by team? Is it an enterprise-wide? Are your customers using multiple solutions, et cetera?
Yeah, good question, Ben. So it varies. So for some enterprises, it is deployed organization-wide. For some of them, it's for individual teams. And typically, what we've seen is that the use of Mattermost begins among DevOps teams, IT teams, and other kinds of developer shops that are looking for flexible ways to, let's say, extend or integrate with your existing systems. And from there, it often ends up like the adoption starts to increase and other departments start to adopt Mattermost. Now, for some of the enterprises, they are using Microsoft Teams and Mattermost as an example. And often in those instances, the usage of Mattermost is very relevant for, say, the developers. Basically, Mattermost is a more developer-friendly platform with more options to integrate and otherwise. And that's kind of appealing to many of these developer teams, I suppose. And so the usage can be in parallel, where some part of the enterprise might be using Microsoft Teams, another one is using Mattermost without even direct competition.
All right, very good. And there are no other questions at this time.
Cool. So then yeah, so the next, I'm going to jump into the demonstration piece. So I'm going to switch away from the slides. And this won't be a live demonstration because I wasn't actually able to get a Hipchat server environment, to basically deploy locally, because Atlassian doesn't seem to provide an evaluation or trial option anymore at this point. So we had our partner Hertzum help record a demonstration of the tool. And so I'll show you that and walk you through the migration steps. So Hertzum has pretty good documentation of the migration tool, and the executables for the application are included in their GitHub repository. There's an executable for Linux, Mac, and Windows platforms. And for this demonstration, they are showing or using the Windows executable. Once you've downloaded it, you can launch the application from the folder that you downloaded the executable to. And once it's launched, this is what the application looks like. So on the left, you have Hipchat related information of your Hipchat server instance. On the right is your Mattermost instance. And basically you enter information for each, validate the credentials, and then perform the migration. So let's go ahead and enter information for the Hipchat server instance. First, you'll specify the server address or IP for your Hipchat server. And then you specify a user ID. And this user ID is one that has access to export data from a Hipchat instance. Typically, it's an administrative account, but really it can be any account as long as it has access to export data from your Hipchat server. You then set the associated password of that account and select the server environment. For the environment, you can either choose AWS or Linux. In this case, they have been running Hipchat on AWS, so they'll select that option. And if you select AWS, the next step is to specify the PEM file. And the PEM file is required to access the server from the machine from where you're running the application. And the Hertzum documentation has additional details about Amazon easy to keep pairs and PEM files and how to generate those. But once you generated a PEM file, you essentially have to upload it from your file directory. So we'll do that here. You just select it from your documents. One thing that I'll note is that if you've selected Linux as your server environment, you don't have to specify the PEM file. The user ID and the password that you specified previously is enough to export the data from Hipchat. Then you hit validate, and this essentially confirms that the Hipchat credentials you entered are valid and that the application has access to perform the export of the data. If there are any errors in the validation, those will be included on the lower panel of the application with more details on what caused the error. Next, let's add the same information with Mattermost with the server IP address, then the user ID that has access to import data into your instance, along with its associated password. And then you'll specify the Mattermost team name. And this team is the one to which channels, users, and messages are imported into. A team can really be anything as long as it already exists in the system. So you have to create a team in your Mattermost server and then use it for this application to which all the data is imported into. You can always rename the team later on. Most important is that you have that team already existing. So we'll set the team name. Then you also specify the server environment, in this case AWS. You select the PEM file, and then you hit validate. If the Mattermost credentials are validated, that means you're ready to start the migration, and you hit the migrate button. When the migration process begins, you'll start to get informational messages in the lower panel of the application. Basically, it'll give you just updates of the migration process, if there's any errors or any failures as well. In addition to what you're seeing on the screen, there's also a migration file, log file. That went a little bit too fast. So there's also a migration log file that gets created in the same folder from where you launch the application from. In this folder, this file will have more information about, specifically about the migration, including any errors or failures that you might have, so that you can troubleshoot further if needed. Then we'll continue. The migration process will run. And then once it's completed, you'll basically see a success message saying the migration process successfully completed, as well as the time that it took. And that's all that's needed. You enter Hipchat credentials, you enter Mattermost credentials, you validate both of these credentials to make sure that the application has access to export the data and import it to your Mattermost team. You hit migrate, and the migration process finishes here. So I'll switch to the slides, and I'll also pause to see if there are any questions about the migration.
Jason, there is a question from Charlie. Does this migration tool also import direct messages?
Good question, and the short answer is yes. So it migrates public and private rooms in Hipchat into public and private channels in Mattermost, and then private conversations into direct message channels.
So then, this is a question from me, actually. How does that relate, all the different rooms and DMs between people? How does that relate to the single Mattermost team?
Good question. So the public and private rooms or channels get created in the Mattermost team. The direct message channels actually aren't directly tied to the team, so they'll just get imported into the Mattermost server and basically be accessible to all the users in the system.
And one last question on that: Does the user in Mattermost have to match the user in Hipchat for those DMs to match up when they all get moved to DM to Mattermost?
Okay. Yeah, so they would have to match up, at least for the initial migration process.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thanks for the question, Charlie. And Jason, there are no more questions at this time, but for those of you who are on, feel free to ask your questions throughout, and I'll get those to Jason when we can.
Cool. Great questions so far. So then moving on to the third segment of the webinar is a live demonstration of a few of the integrations with Mattermost, and specifically GitHub, Confluence, and Jira. In addition to these integrations, there are also others, other common DevOps tools that you can integrate Mattermost with, including Bitbucket and Opsgenie, Jenkins, and others. And we have an integrations directory in integrations.mattermost.com, where you can find integrations that are currently available and either built by our team or built in partnership with either with Atlassian partners or vendors, as well as built by our open source developer community. So I'm going to switch away from the slides and go into Mattermost. So actually, I'll switch away from the full screen view here. Great. So this is Mattermost. It's fairly similar to what you would see in Hipchat. You have messages, message area in the center. Conversations are organized into channels. You can select favorite channels. You have your public and private channels, and then your direct messages. And what I'll focus the webinar on is running through a sample use case of resolving an incident, and while using Mattermost, Jira, and GitHub all kind of together as part of the issue resolution. So in this case, there is a report that was published in GitHub about a system outage. And this report was posted into this Mattermost channel, the incident war room channel. And this report that you see has some system information. It's got system blogs, which are automatically syntax highlighted. And then there's also an image attachment. And let's suppose that I've seen this issue a couple of times. And so I want to ask my manager if I should go ahead and create a Jira issue to start investigating it further. So I'm going to hit reply for this GitHub issue. And this is going to open a reply thread on the right-hand side for me. So I'm going to ask my manager, Sally, if I should create a Jira issue for this, as I've seen this happening a few times. So the message has been posted, and then I see Sally typing here. And let's suppose just a moment here. Switching between windows. Okay, so Sally responded to basically go ahead. And what I could do is basically copy and paste the information, switch to my Jira instance, and go and create a ticket for it there. However, what I can do is actually do that right in the Mattermost interface. So I can hover over the message, click more actions, and I can create a Jira issue. And I'll first select a project, a DevOps incident project. I'll set this as a bug ticket. And what you might notice is that there's already a description pre-populated. And this description was basically copy-pasted from the message from which I created the issue. So it's already ready to go here. I will use the issue title as the summary field, do a little bit of cleanup, set the priority to be highest, and then go ahead and create the issue. And now the Jira issue has been created. If I go to my Jira project, it'll probably ask me to log in. So into my credentials. And there it is. So this is something that I just created in Mattermost, in the Mattermost interface. Now I'll switch back to Mattermost and show the next stage of the demo.
Jason, here's a question,
Yeah.
quick question on this. Could that integration be modified a little bit so maybe that subject line could have been pre-populated and or any other of the fields like an assignee or a priority or whatever?
Yeah, so I would say not currently out of the box, but one, we're looking to enhance the plugin itself. And second, the plugin is actually open source. So you can easily take it and customize it to meet exactly what you would hope it to do.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Excellent. Now, let's suppose Sally, my manager, posted another message here saying there are some additional logs that she found, which may be relevant for this issue. That's great. Now, I would like to keep all of the important information in one place. And in particular, I like to basically copy these logs that Sally just posted in the Jira issue that I created. What I can do is hover over the message, again, go to more actions, and say attach to the Jira issue. I can either search for the issue or select one from the drop-down if it's available. Here's the issue that we just created. The message that Sally posted is automatically copied as the message. And if I hit attach, Sally's message was attached to the issue. And I'll just open it to show you what it looks like on the Jira issue. So in here, I attached the message and it's basically embedded as a Jira comment. And so basically the use case is that you might have a lot of conversation and collaboration about an issue in Mattermost. And then you might want to basically take a snippet of that conversation and attach it as part of the Jira issue so that when you start working on it, all that information is in one place, easily accessible. And you can do that with the integration we have in place. So now I'm ready to start on the issue. So first I'll assign it to me. Looks like I'm Kenneth on this Jira project. And then what I'll do is, let's suppose that I've been working on it and I have, I found the, I found the root cause and fix coming soon. So I'll add as a comment. And you might see there's a notification popping up on my screen here. And actually, if I go back to Mattermost and go back to the incident war room channel, you'll see that the bug was assigned to Kenneth, and then there was a comment made on that ticket as well. And what this enables is for my manager, Sally, to basically stay up to speed on the progress of the issue, who is working on the incident, any status updates that are posted, without having her ping me or ask me, hey, who's working on this, or what's the status on this ticket. She can just follow the notifications in the incident war room channel and stay up to date on the progress. Now, of course, you can configure what notifications are sent to Mattermost. So if you want more updates or fewer updates, you can do so and configure those notifications.
So then a short question. If you had just transitioned the workflow to in progress, that could have been sent to this saying, okay, got it.
Yeah, exactly. And that, yeah, so transitions are also supported. Good. So then, as I said, found the root cause, fix is coming soon. So let's suppose that we're using the GitHub tool for our Git workflows. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a dummy pull request for this. So fixes DOI-2 system outage. I'm going to create a new branch and then create a pull request. So again, these updates, so I've created the pull request. If I go back to the incident war room channel, these are also posted back to Mattermost. So people can see that I created a branch, that I've submitted a pull request, and again, you can configure what notifications get sent to Mattermost. What's key is that everyone can stay up to date on the progress, on status updates, without having to switch between apps or without having to ask those team members individually. Now I'm back in Mattermost and I've submitted the pull request, and I realized that the Jira ticket itself still has status as open because I never transitioned it. As Bill was also asking if it was transitioned, would that be sending a notification back to Mattermost? But without switching back to Jira, I can actually transition the issue in Mattermost, and I can do that with a / command. So I can do a / Jira transition. I can specify the issue key and then say done. And that's transitioned the issue, and it posts a message back saying the bug is now resolved. And so that basically gives a demonstration of collaborating on an incident, working on it in Mattermost from the issue report to actually resolving the issue, and the two-way integrations between Mattermost, Jira, and GitHub while you're working and collaborating with your team in resolving these incidents. So I will briefly show something about Confluence as well, but I'll pause in case there's any new questions.
I just sent a reminder in chat as well, Jason, but there are no questions right now. But for those listening, type them in as you have them. So, and we'll get to them. So I'd love to see the Confluence integration too. Cool.
Great. So what I'll do is I'll switch to Confluence, bring the tab over here, and I'll basically give a pretty simple example of creating a page in Confluence.
And Jason, since you're just starting here, a question just came in. Cool. So, and it's about the previous, the workflows. Is done the name of the transition? So I guess in your example, is done the name of the transition or the status it's being transitioned to? The question.
It would be, yeah, that's a good question. It would be the status of the issue. So in this case, in the Jira project, the ticket status itself is called done. It is not the transition.
Okay. Okay, Charlie, type in the chat if that answers your question or if it doesn't. But I'll let Jason keep going. Thanks, Charlie.
Good. So then, yeah, so I'm in Confluence. Let's say I want to create a blog post here. So I'll go ahead and create it. And here we go. So I'm going to add a page title first. blog post. And then this will be the description. And let's go ahead and publish that. And then in addition to publishing it, I can also create or write a comment. Once Confluence loads here for me, so here is the comment. I'll save that. And so both of these actions basically send notifications into Mattermost. So the Confluence integration that's actually currently in the Atlassian Marketplace is a relatively simple webhook-based integration with Mattermost. And you can send notifications about new blog articles or pages being created, as well as comments. Now, I would say that there is actually a new Confluence add-on for Mattermost that we're working with Hertzum, the partner who built the Hipchat to Mattermost migration tool. And that add-on will cover more use cases. So in addition to just sending notifications into channels, you can also receive at mentions to your direct message channel about mentions in Confluence pages. You can also create pages in Mattermost through / commands, as well as send comments to Confluence pages in Mattermost through / commands. And then there's other like user configuration options available for configuring these notification preferences. And I'm pretty excited about that integration, and that's expected to come later this summer with an early preview, potentially already next month. So that's exciting development for Confluence as well. So I will switch back to the slides. And that concludes the webinar on my end. So if there are any questions, I'll be here for a few more minutes. There's also contact information on how to reach out, as well as at Mattermost Twitter handle, where you can reach out as well.
Yeah, for those listening, if you have questions about migrating to Mattermost from Hipchat, contact Jason and his team. His contact information is there. You can contact us at Service Rocket as well if you need help. We're happy to do that as well. And Jason, I have a question about the Confluence integration. That was an example of a blog post getting notified. Does that apply to any page or templates that I have created that would do that no matter what? If I'm documenting anything that I'm working on?
Yes, so basically you have the option of configuring which of those, but yes, if you're creating a page, that can also send a notification back.
Okay, very good. And so this is a last call for questions. So if you have any last questions for Jason, type those in right now and we'll get to them. Jason, there are no questions at this moment. So I'll give someone maybe 5 or 6 seconds to finish typing, and then we will let people go. And for those of you who might be typing a question, we have recorded this webinar, and we will send out the recording within 24 hours. Hopefully, it's possible even the end of today. We'll send that out to you, so you'll have it, and you can refer to that later. So expect the recording shortly, within 24 hours. And Jason, I'm not seeing any other questions, so I want to thank you for joining. Jason, this is very informative. I learned a lot too, especially about the integrations with Jira and Confluence. So it's very good. And for those of you who need help, contact Mattermost or contact us, and we will help you out. And people are saying thanks in the chat. So thank you. Thanks for joining all.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone.
Have a nice day, everyone. Bye now.